Hope everybody's doing well. I'm DiGaetano. I'm at Fordham University. We're going to get into the tackling side of everything. Sorry, the phases of tackling, sorry, Billy. All the other stuff too. I'll give you like a brief history. I came up from New York, drove up this morning. This is my basically my second home up here in Portland. I do vacation here every summer. I came here a couple of years ago, so I know this block better than I know my own block basically at this point. Even when, after a couple I can probably figure out where I'm at. And I get over to Peaks Island all summer. I do the whole thing, so I'm around. So basically, that's my brief history. Okay, my football history is I coached defensive football at Fordham, and I really like to coach tackling. So that's my whole history. Right? That's all I care about. That's all that matters. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. So I was kind of walking through a couple of the places I saw everybody's kind of talking about tackling. So number one, I know I'm on the right track because it's a really important thing, right? Fundamental skill. What I'm going to try to talk about today is, and I've got a lot of different presentations, and if you want to take my Twitter page or whatever the case may be get in touch with me. There's clinics out there. I have no problem sharing stuff, like whatever the case may be, for you to help you get better. When we got to the place here, and I watched this, I've probably been a big part of watching this, roughest about 2008. We were at a small Division III school in ECFC where we used to play against Husson. And what ended up happening was we weren't very good, right? We weren't very athletic either. So I had to figure out a way to get good really fast. So I centered it around being able to go ahead and teach our guys how to be fundamentally sound in tackling, right? So we started with the non-pad stuff because we were Division III. At the time, there was no padding in the spring football. We were very limited. We also sent our guys out on a ship every summer. So it became something I invested time in. And ultimately, what it materialized later was that it became what I centered everything around. Because ultimately, if I could figure out what it looks like at the most critical point on defensive football, about what it looks like at the end of the play, and work backwards, I feel like I'm on something, right? Scheme will settle itself into that stuff. How it's ironic how it's happened because it's all kind of come full circle for me with this, because we've broken this up into phases now. So what I'm going to really center a lot of what it is now, and I will tell you this, there's a ton of drills on here, right? We film the drills for our players, we mark them up, we have them open sourced on a website, we actually assign them out for Google Forms. They do it each week independently. It's optional, right? The option is you can get better, or you can tell me you don't, basically. That's the option, right? And they are able to do a lot of this on their own or with partners. So you'll see the film, the stuff I show you, the film, is actually the film that they have access to. They get it, they have a website, they get it on a form, the links, it's very easy stuff to do. And they're able to continuously gain reps. Our whole thing has become about repetition. It's about as many repetitions as possible for them to explore with themselves how to get better at this, right? There is a lot of obviously instruction with this, but in the end of the day, there's obviously leading up to the football, right? There's being in position, there's contact, and there's dominance of contact. Right? And in order to go ahead, if I was going to pick one of those things that I'm going to be absolutely insanely great at, it's going to be as close to the football as possible. Then I'm going to work the rest of it out, because a lot of really good things happen in defensive football when you're close to the football, right? And especially when you're square to the football. So I will, if I don't get that, if I get nothing more important across today, is the idea that we are vigilant about the fact that we are going to be square to the football. Everything we do is about pushing us to be square to the football and about getting more square to the football in regard to it too. Okay, a couple of things about tackling. Okay, just to kind of get some background, is the idea that 65 to 70% of every game, every scrimmage play is going to result in tackle, 5 to 8% is a takeaway. But what happens is, there's only about 4 to 6% of your practice is probably scheduled for drills. So the meaning is you've got to equate, you've got to figure out ways to get that and that to match up, and the gap is tremendous inside of there. So obviously we'll talk about how we grade and we do all that other stuff too, but we grade every single drill in the simplest way possible, being square to the football. What's your entry point to the ball? Every single one, I'll show you what that looks like too. Okay, and then obviously everything is about tackling. Everything is about position, whether it's contact or not, it's always going to be about position, okay? This is a big saying that I have, right? Make the extreme routine. Make the extreme routine, right? So you have to kind of look at all these. Apologize in advance, I'm a Yankees fan, right? I know I'm in New England, but I'm a Yankees fan. And I used to be impressed watching in right field Paul O'Neill. Paul O'Neill would think of every single at-bat right? You would see him with his glove in his hand, thinking about the last at bat, thinking about his swing. He was not in the batter's circle. His team wasn't even up, but he was continuously kind of going through the motions of that type of thing. So it's about making all these scenarios in their head develop a place where they don't get tunnel vision, where it becomes natural to them. Because, and this is what we talk about too, the idea of being able, in contact performance, to find that proximal zone that you're there for optimal survival. And the key is, when we talk about optimal survival for combat performance, there's three basic pieces, right? Being able to manage complex motor skills, being able to go ahead and have visual reaction time, and then to be able to have cognitive reaction time, right? So what does that kind of look like, right? Because when they get panicked is when they go ahead and start to heart rate elevates, they get tunnel vision, they can't see the whole field. So again, we get to the idea, we want to see a little so we can see a lot, right? So we want to be natural, again, training the eyes and all of this stuff. These are just some side notes as I get into it. And some of the pieces that we talk about, the complex motor skills. What are the movements required to go ahead and learn? That's number one. So again, a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about in the first phase is going to be about movement, okay? Visual reaction time. Visual reaction time. How fast can I react? Basically, you want to be able to react in that 0.25 a second, right? Boom. In that little portion of the second, be able to react, and then the cognitive rate of reaction time. Being able to strengthen the connection between your body and your brain. I always think about this, right? The further you are away, the more you have to track. The further they are away, your feet have to speak to your brain. The two furthest parts of your body have to speak to each other and see the distance. That triangle is huge that ends up happening and thin when that happens. So again, it's about space, about creating space, and about taking away space. We also incorporate this, okay, starts with, we're gonna look at phases. I gotta go ahead and involve the weight room, right? Because we're gonna talk about movements, okay? Or just laughing, right? You wore shorts in Maine in March, you're a weight room guy, I can tell right away. There's no doubt you're not a weight room guy, if that's the case. I love it. But anyway, when we talk about this, it's a matter, we basically have our own, we talk about contact performance. Because we can't go ahead and force bad movements with resistance in the weight room, and then when we see those things don't happen, we can't expect them to happen then on the football field when we start to move around. So it all starts with number one, do they trust you? At the foundation, at the base of it, are you that prepared that they trust you? And then we work our way up, and we operate on this side when we plan coaching, right? Matching up that side, right? So it looks, the psychological part of it, right? We just talked about cognition. We talked about confidence, right? A little bit more, the more I try, the more confident I get, okay? First time a kid walks, what ends up happening? They fall down. They cry, okay? Does every kid who falls down later cry? Like when they get to know, because they understand what it is. A lot of kids don't do it, I get it. But they understand how to fall. There's a big difference. Understanding how to fall is something you learn and you gain confidence that that doesn't hurt as much as maybe something else did. Or that wasn't as bad as something else went. And then obviously the spirituality. Why am I doing the drill? Now it doesn't mean you have to have obviously religion or anything involved in spirituality, but what is this drill actually doing? What are we actually trying to accomplish with the drill at the foundation? And then we start to incorporate, we're looking at the energy systems, and then obviously the movement and stability, right? Tackleability, which I call, it's a term I use all the time, tackleability is mobility and stability. I can move, and when I hit, then I'm stable, right? So that's two different things, okay? We're kind of thinking about those two things at once, and then obviously speed and power is part of it too. And you look at the small part on the top, the technical and the tactical scheme and game speed and decision making is such a small part when it comes to the confidence building in there too, right? Former social studies teacher, so I do everything in a pyramid, the caste system and the like who's on the top and all the other stuff too, so I get that side of it. But you see, it's like, it boils down to one word, right? Fitness and drill together, right? So, okay, it's a matter of those two things combined. Functional and the skill, right? The will, do I want to do it, and do I have the health systems to provide inside of it too? And hopefully they meet at the top. I won't kill you with data, but just to kind of give you an idea, a study that we do each year, this is what we actually introduce to our players. We talk about the idea of, we look at four things. When I look at grading, I look at four things. I used to have massive grading systems. I killed all of it, right? And I came down to this. Where do we enter the football? Doesn't matter, right? And this is statistical data that provides you with it too. Basically, square to the football, on an angle at the front hip, on the back hip, or from behind. And if you look at this, just see this column itself, if times we're square to the football, sorry Skip, I'm in, like I'm rolling. You got it. So you see, we were 141 times, that's the average, 2.23 yards when we are square to the football. And I'm talking, the first guy square to the football, I don't even care. You notice, there's no missed tackles on here. I don't care. And on average, when we're square to the football, 2.23 yards a carry, and when we go ahead and this is how many guys we get to the football. Let me go to the all the way. I'm not going to go to the last one because that's not really fair. But if I was 208 times, it's double. And it's one less guy at the football, right? And you look at the yards per game that happen inside there too. Glaring. That's why that's all we care about. It's a long way for me to go to tell you. And then we try to explain to our players that in the end of the day, if you do it at this rate across, right? This is what we grade. We look at the percentage of plays that we have. We start with, if it's 20%, 40% you could read, it's fine. The idea is the more you're square, obviously the less yards you have. If you get into that category and everybody's kind of different, this is just at our level, you're going to be one of the top 10 defense in the country. So it's constantly, maybe at the beginning of the season, proving the point, so we got to prove the science behind it, but we got to get the art to get that done, right? It starts now, from where we are now, we'll start this process, we'll get to that for the end of next season, right? For the beginning of, in the spring, we'll talk about phases. We ultimately start with really grading our players in. And there's a lot of statistical data when it comes to it, but ultimately all we care about, and this looks like really fancy, but it's not a lot of data that we didn't provide, right? It's about entry point, right? It's all about entry point. This guy's pretty good with statistics. And the thing was, I was never big on stats until I realized stats are production, right? Stats are production. So we need to know who's productive in this, like who's at the football. So I've gotten more of that. And the bottom line becomes, what does that individual guy actually have to get rid of, get better at from the feet to the eyes, right? So it goes back to footwork, leg drive, hip explosion, grip and grab, shoulder contact, and eyes. We only do this for returning players. It's worth it when you know them. It does take time to go through every guy, to kind of recall, to do it, but if we don't know them, like what are we doing? You know, at the end of the day, so these are things that, yes, there's graphics and stuff like that. Believe me, I'm not this graphic genius or anything like that. I do all my own stunts and everything. But at the end of the day, it looks nice for them. It's appealing to them to get it in. But in the end of the day, can I actually go through that for each guy? And you look, this kid is obviously very productive. He's a great kid. But what happens, I'm going to focus on this. He needs to keep his trail foot in the framework. I'm going to get into that as a big point about being able to push your center mass. About the fact that every time he approaches, the trail foot is out of place, right? He can't push his body, right? Again, we're going to tell him near foot, but if he can't get his feet underneath his hips and he can't push himself forward, near foot ain't for shit. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? You can't near foot when the trail foot is all the way behind. Okay, so I'm going to get into all of those pieces, but you see, like him being able, he's good at unlocking his hips at multiple levels, so that's something he mastered. And we're going to get into how we get to those components too. Because ultimately, I got a punch list at the end, right? So I say, what are our tackling needs? And the first thing I'm going to look at, right, what does everybody need in this program? And the number one thing I would say is obviously keeping our feet underneath our hips. That's it, bottom line. And I was just talking to Cooper next door. And I said, when I go into spring, when we start next week, all I'm going to care about is, did we get better at this? Like, what are the drills we're doing? Do they function? Does everybody, and that goes back to the idea of the spirituality, does everybody in this program know that we have to get our feet under our hips on contact? And can we identify with each other when it's not happening, right? That's a big one. Obviously being able to cross over to gain our first step, right? A lot of times, and I studied some programs, I was studying HIT. They do an unbelievable job when they're able to cross over at gaining ground. Like we again, space first, and then obviously being able to get tight to entry points, not widen yourself out. So again, you might have seen you're going to see a ton of drills, but what are you trying to accomplish? And then you start looking at levels, right? And I want to just make sure for time, I'll roll through. I'll give you a brief overview of the things I do in our tackling system. Just an idea. First of all, everything you notice in the top corner, which is not there, is about seek, strike, and string. So it's about finding your way to the ball, hitting the ball, dominating the finish. Seek, strike, and string, right? Strike, we'll get into for a second. Seek is about closing space, right? And then ultimately, strain, we can't really go ahead. We can't just go ahead and pinpoint what strain is. But everybody, finish, we gotta finish. We're gonna always say finish on top and face the goal line for strain. That's what we're just straining to do. Face the opposing goal line, finish on top, whatever, right? That's what we're gonna do. But I can't go ahead and always come up with like this great pinpoint drill for strain. Sometimes you gotta strain and get it figured out. We'll get into some of that too, how we do that. We talk about the idea of goat into seek, right? Goat, right? They always say it's the greatest of all time. I always tell them, you wanna be the goat, you gotta eat grass. That's it. Bottom line, you gotta take up space first, right? Take up space. So that's a huge selling point for us. I give them that. They make really a lot of fun of me. All that other stuff happens. We get into some of the drill work we do to get to that, to lead into that, but ultimately we do all the stuff everybody else does. We do the space, the pace to hip, we do the take space drills, we do the fights drills, all those other stuff. But the idea we're telling them is take space, right? Then we get into strike. This gets a little bit more particular with strike. The thing is with strike, right? If I can go ahead, first of all, lead with my eyes, and I can go ahead and find a place that I would go ahead on the body that is that ideal place, like if I can find that, that puts me in a tremendous benefit. So what we ended up doing, we said, well, what is standard on a human being, right? The torso is the standard on the human being, which is basically from the bony part, that little bony part you have the iliac crest, to the C7 vertebrae. Now, I am not a doctor, but I have Google, so I looked that up. Okay, so everybody kind of knows. All right, so I'm not that smart, but I'm not, at the end of the day, we said somewhere in there that basically is going to be proportional for everything else. This is standard though, is what the number is. The number sits, that says about 18 to 20, the number is 8 to 10 inches. So what the idea works around is the idea that we want to be at the low part of the number. From the high part of the thigh to the low part of the number is the ideal situation for us to kind of be in. Because not only does it go ahead and put us in the best spot to lead with the shoulder width, but it allows their body to flex, right? There's flexion in their body. I don't want to run into a part of their body, ideally, that doesn't move. The hips move. I get displaced because my goal is to go ahead and move his center mass. I'll give you the illustration what that looks like in a second, right? I want to move his center mass with my center mass. So again, if I keep my feet under my body and push myself into him, that's me moving my center mass. If I can move and displace his center mass, then I'm in the winning position. And then we look at the 3 levels, right? It uses like a classic lever system, okay? When you talk about where is the input force as opposed to the output force, and ultimately where is the fulcrum, okay? So just an example where that fulcrum sits on side, like almost like the seesaw, where you're pushing in opposite directions at the center, really replicates some form of roll tackle. Something that still maybe needs to be displaced. If you're looking a little bit more, when you put it in the at the bottom, is our ideal situation where the input force and the fulcrum are in 2 different spots and moving in those directions. That's where I can now move it. That's where the whole thing can now move. Okay? Now, and this is a classic situation where I'm toe-to-toe, nose-to-nose, right? And now the forces are working against each other, and it's at the bottom. And this leads to a lot of twisting, right? Above the waist, below the waist, and a lot of twisting. I love using the emojis because it makes sense to them. But I tell them, if you are like this, square, and you strike, and this is the point that I use for them, the coaching point I use is toes to target, nose to number, right? So I'm always trying to go ahead and make sure my toe is pointed at the target and my nose is at the level of the number. So if toes to target, nose to number, that's the coaching point I use all the time. Toes to target, nose to number, toes to target, nose to number. A lot of times it just gets into eyes. Hey, eyes, put your eyes on the hip, eyes on the hip, eyes on the hip. But it's always going back to what we're looking behind it, is the toes to target, nose to number. And if he's like that, then I can go ahead and make him like this. Just place these 2 triangles that he has. And then obviously having fun with them, and then watching this and making rules for them. Because these are kids that want rules, right? They want to be held to a standard of rules, right? So the other piece too, we always try to tell them, never leave your feet when you're on his front number, right? That's a big one. That's a big standard for us. You know, square is strong, right? Triangle is stronger, okay? The triangle is even stronger to be able to stack your feet. okay? The margin of error for you is the length of your arm. That is my margin of error in tackling, right? Like flying the airplane, this is my margin of error, right? Like stronger, weaker, that's it. If you go stronger, weaker, that's amazing, right? But ultimately, this is attached to me and all this other stuff. This is going to be a lot weaker than this. But this is my margin of error in each direction, right? That's what that is, okay? And if you need to twist, you're probably too high. That still means you need to twist, okay? And then, you know, use the ground on your feet. That's a big part of it too, right? Keeping your cleats in the ground, but use the ground on your feet. That's the thing that's also standard in the game, okay? And if you leave your feet, anticipate rolling. Anticipate rolling. We'll get into that in a second too with some of the drill work. We talk about the idea of hitting with the trunk and running through the branches. So we're always giving the visual of that with the tree. Hit it with the trunk, run through the branches. I put that in there because we do present to the offense too. So we tell them, run through their branches. Like we try to reiterate that too. And then we talk about near foot, right? But the key is this, how fast can I get that to happen? So we use the term snap for that. Shoulder, near foot, add power. Shoulder, near foot, add power. So anyway, we're talking about, we're shoulder-led tackling. We're leverage tackling, we're shoulder-led tackling, but we're gonna use the term snap, right? Because, and this is a great illustration. Shoulder, near foot. Now, what happens is if you go near foot, shoulder, that's not always ideal. And a lot of times what you'll see is that guys will end up putting their heel in the ground rather than their toe in the ground when they lead with just the near foot too. They don't stay up on their toes and they can't go ahead and roll over that front foot. So we reiterate the idea of shoulder, near foot, add power, and then get into this side of it too. The idea that, and then all of this is under the idea of strike. So you notice, right? Seek, I was like, get there. Strike, I'm like gonna give you a lot more details in, because that's where the dynamic has to go, right? The strike part of it too. And we talk about the idea of the zone of dominance, like we just talked about, the nose to number area, that area we just talked about. But when I'm in a negative position, I'm probably going to have to twist or turn to displace, okay? So if I'm in a positive position, Billy, jump up please, okay? If I'm in a positive position where Billy is square to me, I get lower than him into that area, I can have leverage, I can run my feet. The difference is though, as soon as he puts his arms in like he's carrying a football, right, and I'm around him, who has more leverage right now? He does. So he has to be displaced. He's going to have to be displaced in order to do that. A lot of times, in order to do that, because how many times do you see that this kid drops, and this kid ends up behind, right? So we teach them to get out of that fast. If you watch heavyweights wrestle, that happens, right? Very few of those guys shoot, and when they get there, they go ahead and they have to displace, they have to move the angles. They don't just run into each other. So again, it's just a teaching tool. And then we talk about from the top. Obviously, if I'm in the trail, I'm in a negative position below the waist, but if I'm in an L above the waist and I close enough space, I can run through them. I can potentially run through them and drive my feet. I just a video with strain inside of it, and I just love showing this for strain. These are 3 straight 4th and 1s on the same drive, okay? They get it, and then you'll see on the 3rd one, you see 47 jump over the top. That's strain. But I'm like, I can't teach that. I didn't teach that kid that. That's strain, right? He went and took that, he got it, and he got stopped at 4th and 1 on the goal line, right? That's strain. He finished on top, he got there. I'm not gonna micromanage that side of it, but he understood the difference between what strain actually looked like, right? Okay, I'll skip that. Here's our phases. I don't know what I'm doing time. I'm gonna keep rolling now until somebody tells me not to. Okay, but here's our phases. We break this up for us. Now I would tell you this, I'll preface this by saying this, okay? We have the luxury of having a pre-spring winter workout time. So at different levels, of college, at different high school, whatever the case may be, even youth, there's a way to kind of do this. But we do this, what I'm gonna show you we do in pre-spring, because I used to do in spring when we were non-pad. Right? If I was doing in high school, this would be something I would do in the spring. This would be something I could do in the weight rooms. This stuff you can kind of mix and match with this and where it gets done. Right? I will say this. This is a contact period. Excuse me. This is a non-contact. This is non-contact period for buying the body, not recruiting. And this is a contact period. This is a non-contact period. And this is a contact period. So it's broken up inside there too, where these 2 sections are married up and these 2 sections are somewhat married up. Okay, all trying to get the same thing done. Okay? And what I'm gonna focus in what this looks like, and this menu looks like, and understand when you see all this stuff that's on there in the pre-spring, these are also stuff that we give them online to do on their own. So all these things can be done on their own when they're like once a week at post-weight room, or when they're home on break. If they're not in the summer series for us and they're home, they can do it on their own. The expectation is obviously we have them send it in and do all that other stuff too. But it's broken up into 3 categories. It's an individual, a partner, and a specialty category. So the individual is going to work, I'll show you that in a second. Obviously the partner is more than one person, and the specialty, we look at the situational stuff, right? Being able to leverage one-arm tackling for the interior guys, when they're restricted, and the knock stiff arm. We also have the med ball series, which supports it, and the penetration series that supports it too. I'll throw all of them up. Okay, so individual drills. If you email me or text me or whatever, I'll just send you the link. Like I don't have to, I have it all uploaded. I don't do all that, you get the link. You're good, you're fine. It's open, whatever, it happens. It's cat at the end of the day. It's not revolution. But anyway, the idea is we start from the back to the front on this when we're teaching. So we don't start from the space. So we start from the actual finished position, right? This is what we used to do. Took it years ago from the Bill Williams stuff and from the Chuck Clements and guys I took from back years ago. But what ends up happening is we'll start, and I'm just gonna let the drills play, okay? Chest over knee, flat back position, and we're just gonna work ourselves into the clamp. We'll get multiple angles on this. We'll get our knees over toe, and you notice that we're scraping, and we're emphasizing the idea of scraping paint with our elbows, about bringing our hips. And the key on this is that we want him to maintain position, and we want him to pull from his lats, get his elbows together, look through his pinky fingers, and form that clamp on the backside. We want the full extension, full strain of the hips, holding position, driving through. Okay, so we're going to start with how we want that to look on the finish. Points of emphasis are obviously being able to go ahead and get our chest over our knee. Get into that hit-up position quickly, right? We will do it with our players where we'll actually have them move their arms as if they're running, then transition quick, and then drive through. Everything tight, 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 tight. You'll see that all the time, okay? And then we just manifest, you'll start to see, and we start to get walking. So same drill, clamp, and now we're gonna walk high and wide, high and wide. Just walk it out. Just walk it out in there. Maintain position, add the stimulus. Squeeze from the lats, continuously roll over, get that done, right? Maintaining eyes through the hands, there's a strain on the face, then we're working it back, so we're working it slowly, okay, reverse engineering. Then we get into the double time piece, we pick up the pace on it, boom, 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 boom. You notice, right, a couple things. Now that he's moving faster, his hips aren't as open, right? Okay, his eyes aren't as focused on top. These are things we have to pinpoint. Even on the instructional piece of it too, we have to continuously go ahead and work through that. Work through it high and wide, okay? So that's how we start out with everything for it. Then we get into, like I said, teaching them to twist.